to you. Please click on the share screen button so that we can see your presentation.
1 second.
And Abdelkader, yeah, I see your presentation. He's very active in the BCI society. He also worked in a very famous lab in Japan with robotics. I'm pretty sure he will show you some results of that. And they are also doing now in his lab very nice robotic work with human-like robotic beings. And they had it also in the last hackathon, and one of the winners of the hackathon was actually controlling this robot with the brain-computer interface. And of course, we all want to learn from you how this is actually done to use BCIs for human-like robotic control. As an expert for that, please go ahead and let us know how this works.
Okay, so good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for having me today. A huge thank you maybe for Christoph and for his organizing team for this amazing Spring School event. And I'm sure no one can gather all these outstanding experts except him. And also I'm very happy that we have our student here today. So I'm going to present decoding of simultaneous bilateral hand movement for real-time control of a human-like robot using brain activity. By the way, this research was a part of a big research project called IMPACT. It was in Japan, which includes many outstanding researchers such as Dr. Hirata, a neurosurgery medical doctor, and also Dr. Hiroshi Ishiguro, a robotics scientist. First, maybe I will talk about the possibility of increasing dimensionality. I mean by that the control dimension or degree of freedom, and achieving a continuous and multi-dimensional control of multiple devices using brain signal only. I mean, not including, for example, muscles activity or eye movement. Of course, we can include non-brain activity we can combine them with brain activity to maybe increase classification accuracy or something else. But this time I will just focus on using brain signal or brain activity only. And in the beginning, maybe I'm going to define the problem and its impact on senior citizens. I mean by that, especially Japanese society, and how we can solve it using the technology of brain-machine interface. And then I will explain details, all steps of neuromagnetic decoding of bilateral hand movement. And also in this talk, I will show you a video demonstration about real-time control of a human-like robot, not only a humanoid, so using this MEG signals. So before starting, let's start by a brief history of this field. Research studies on BCI began in the 1970s at the University of California, and the papers published after this research marked the first appearance of the expression brain-computer interface in scientific literature. And also the first maybe BCI applications, such as I'm talking about EEG control of physical objects, such as a robot, mobile robot, for example, or robotic arm, was in 1988. And I'm sure that any one of you here maybe remember these cartoons or movies such as The Terminal Man or Girl from Tomorrow. In my childhood, these cartoons and movies were source of inspiration for our generation to imagine the possibility of controlling machines with our brain. So that's how the idea started. And I think also most of people here know someone, brother, sister, maybe a friend, colleagues who lives with paralyzed brain. Brain-computer interface technology can give them another chance to interact properly with their environment. So BCI are a system that give their user communication and control capabilities that do not depend on muscles. So we use only brain activity. As I said, we can combine both, but most of handicapped people, especially people, for example, who has some neurological disorder, such as locked-in syndrome or spinal cord injury or some stroke. So they have only one option to use their brain activities. For example, maybe they don't have their muscles activity. So, or for some blind people also, so the brain activity, maybe it can be the only option. So brain-computer interface system are a fast-growing technology involving advanced hardware, software, communication system that control external devices through this activity, electrical activity or brain activity. And one of the important applications of BCI is to provide assistance to this disabled or senior citizens. For instance, the user intentions are captured from activity recorded by electrode on the scalp. We can put the electrode on the scalp, or we can put them on the cortical surface, or within the brain or on the brain. So then we can translate them into useful commands to interact with external environment. And maybe like the best or the most significant definition for BCI that I really like is the one from Wolper, Professor Wolper, where he said brain-computer interface is a system that measure activity of the CNS and convert it into artificial output that replace, restore, enhance, supplement, improve this natural CNS output, and thereby change the ongoing interaction between the CNS and its external or internal environment. And BCI can be used for psychological and neurological disorder, not only neurological disorder, but also for psychological disorder. So we can use a neurofeedback, for example, to enhance human ability in many psychological disorders. We can even reduce stress, for example. But mainly it can be used for people who have motor problem. Okay, so the goal, or the way we would like to develop a neuroengineering system, for example, in this slide, is to detect the brain activity first and turn it into a signal that can be used by computer to initiate some daily life tasks. So you can imagine that if you see number one is the experimental paradigm, for example, and then we record this brain activity using, for example, non-invasive or invasive measurement. So we can use EEG, MEG, fMRI as non-invasive technique. And also we can use ECO or ECOG as an invasive technique where we need surgery. So you can imagine that at the most basic level, 4 steps are needed to set up a functional neuroengineering system. The first one, as I said, experimental paradigm. We will talk about it in the upcoming slide, maybe, because this is very important. You have to choose what kind of paradigm are you going to use. Are you going to use P300, SSVEP, or motor imagery, or other paradigms, in order to understand how the brain works during very, very specific tasks. So this is very also important. And the second maybe step is decoding algorithm, or before that, maybe a way of reading this electrical activity from the brain. We can use, as I said, invasive or non-invasive technique. And then a smart, or it can be a decoding algorithm where we use a classifier or maybe regression. So we can use classifier using machine learning, deep learning, whatever, and to extract some relevant information or features or pattern associated with a meaningful command that can be translated to some devices. For example, you can write, you can control a robotic suit, you can control drone, you can control wheelchair, or you can do whatever with these commands. So this is it will be the output device or computer that would execute this command. So this is how in reality we are like building our assistive, adaptive, rehabilitative BCIs. So as I said, the most important thing is the experimental paradigm. So the most, let's say, common or popular paradigms, we have three. So this is the popular one. Of course, we have more, but let's focus on these three. So we have the P300 paradigm, or we can develop P300-based BCI, and also we have SSVEP-based BCI, and we have also motor imagery-based BCI. So the first one, as I said, it is called a P300 paradigm, which is related to detecting the P300 waves in the brain. Okay, so it is just a wave that appears at 300 milliseconds after any unexpected or expected stimuli or stimulus. The most popular maybe application of this P300 is what we call P300 speller, where the patient can write or kind of spell anything he would like to write and send a message using brain activity. So if you would like, for example, in the hackathon, in the BC hackathon, we are going basically or mainly use P300 speller, and you can do whatever you want with this technology or with this paradigm. You can control wheelchair, you can do whatever, the same paradigm, but the output, it can be whatever you would like to do. The second one is a little bit similar, but it's completely different, what we call SSVEP, where we ask a participant, for example, to focus on some icons, or these icons have predefined frequencies. So by looking only at any frequency, your brain will generate the same frequency. So you can use, for example, FFT, fast Fourier transform, or you can use wavelet transform to find this frequency, and then you can decide, for example, or you can predict what the user would like to do. And of course, you can also control robot directions. You can do whatever you want using this paradigm. Okay, so that's what I'm asking you. For example, if you would like to build, or if you would like to develop your brain-computer interface, the first thing you have to do is to decide what kind of experimental paradigm you are going to use. Are you going to use SSVEP? Sorry, are you going to use P300 speller or SSVEP? The last maybe one is motor imagery. This is a little bit different from the others because this one doesn't need any synchronization between the user and the screen. For example, now I'm talking with you and looking at the camera, for example. So P300, SSVEP, yeah, both of them need synchronization between the user and the screen. But the motor imagery, no, you don't need that. You can close your eyes and imagine movement, hand movement, finger movement, whatever you want. And also based on your very, very specific or relevant information from your brain activity, the decoding algorithm will be able to detect what kind of imagination you would like to perform. So performing movement or imagining the movement, they result to the same features in the brain, and that's something good. So we can collect this information and we can control a robot, we can do whatever we want with this information. So this is the last paradigm, motor imagery. So most of people, for example, use P300 speller or SSVEP because the classification accuracy is extremely high compared with motor imagery, which is a subject-based. So it's depending from subject to another. So you have to kind of teach the subject how to imagine without using visual imagination. So we don't like visual imagination. Okay, so in summary, I just would like to make one point more clear, that we can record brain activity using technique, for example, invasive or non-invasive, such as I said, EEG, MEG, or fMRI. This is like non-invasive technique, or ECOG is invasive technique. And also at the same time, we can, between brackets, write information or send information to your brain. We can use TMS, we can, for example, use sonogenetics, optogenetics. So we can also send kind of information to your brain to decrease, for example, depression from someone. So it has a lot of application, even for Parkinson's disease. So you can see that it's not only for neurological disorder, but also for psychological disorder. Okay, so let's now start talking about humanoid. Why people, or researchers have been developing this kind of robot? Why do we need them? Why do we need, for example, Amica or Sophia or Neo or Pepper, for example? Or for instance, for example, you can even ask just a robot to clean your kitchen, and Neo to teach, for example, social skills to children with autism. So why do we need them? I think it's clear, or the answer for this question is very quite simple, because humanoid robots result in good science. What I mean by that, I mean that they push the boundary in several fields, in several multidisciplinary fields. For example, in biology, cognitive science, engineering, generating thousands of scientific publications and advanced technology in many fields related to humanoid robotics, including, for example, computational neuroscience, AI, speech recognition, compliant grasping and manipulation, cognitive robotics, robotic navigation, perception, and the integration of all these amazing technologies within a total humanoid. So we really dream to create in the end a human-like robot that can behave or can interact in the same way as a human. But the question, is it true that human-like robots are not nearly human level in their abilities today? The answer, yes. Human-like robots fail. They fall, they lose the topic in the conversation, misunderstand us, but at the same time, you have to understand that they disappointed as much as they exhilarate us. So they really doing great job. So you can imagine it's like a baby. So we cannot say because we don't have a perfect humanoid or human-like robot nowadays, so we have to give up. No, because if you look at your baby, the baby also start knowing nothing. So they start learning, and we are patient, and we wait for them until maybe they will have 5 or 6 years, and then we wait for them until they will have 20 years, and they keep learning. So the same things. We are like, you can see this humanoid or human-like robot as a baby. So the researchers have been working on improving that. And of course, when it comes to the shape maybe, or to the degree of similarity to humans in appearance, for example, or even in movement, we are a little bit far, but we are doing a great job. But at the same time, that's why researchers, they are trying to understand if a human accept having robot that looks like us. Is it natural for us to see ourselves in the mirror, to see, for example, new robot that looks like me, for example? So maybe the uncanny valley graph may explain this issue, even if it lacks maybe neuroscientific evidence, but it's very nice graph. I really like it. This graph in this slide is a common and stunning feeling people experience when android, the humanoid robot, and audio visual stimulation closely resemble a human in many respects, but are not quite conventionally realistic. So you can imagine that this uncanny valley graph is a term used to describe the relationship between the human-like appearance of the robotic object and the emotional response it evokes. So in this phenomenon, people feel a sense of unease or even revulsion, not comfortable. They don't feel comfortable in response to humanoid robots that are highly realistic. So especially, for example, if you see a zombie, for example, you will not be comfortable. So that's why researchers have been trying to develop this kind of robot. Do we need this kind of robot? Of course, we need them in many daily life tasks. And I will talk about some of them in the upcoming slide. And why do we need to control this humanoid using P300 or SSVEP? Yes, I mean, many researchers, if you check the literature, they could control this human-like robot or humanoid using P300, SSVEP, and ask this kind of robot to do very specific tasks, such as moving around, grasping a ball, or even neurofeedback therapy. It has been used for example, hugging senior citizens. They claim that they feel much better. So in reality, we do believe that maybe controlling this human-like robot using motor imagery, it could be much better than using, for example, P300 or SSVEP. Anyway, you can imagine that your brain might be able to control more than one body. Your brain has the capacity to maybe control not only 2 hands, it can control 3, 4, 5 hands. So at the same time, and you can do multitask. You can even do multi-presence. So you can send your copy to a place that you don't want to go. For example, nowadays we have this COVID-19, so we don't want to be contaminated. So you can send your copy, so you can send your human-like robot to any place. So you don't need to go out from your room. So that's what this is one of the need that's very important for a human-like robots, for developing a human-like robot. And controlling machine with the brain is the most natural, maybe bypass way, and fast and efficient. And we can even understand ourselves. You can study yourself from this human-like robot. Imagine that we can study our behavior in many scenarios, even if we didn't do that. So we can ask our copy to do that, and we can observe our reactions. So by developing a human-like robot. So the main purpose is that the humanoid robot can act as a human being in such an environment without any previous adjustment for the robot. Okay, so let's now talk about controlling Geminoid using a brain activity only. Why we would like to control Geminoid? Geminoid, it means like human-like robot, okay? So as you may know, the Japanese people are having few babies. So you can imagine Japan after maybe 20 years from now, a few young workers and a lot of older people, senior citizens, which means younger people would have to work overtime to respond to Japan needs. And generally speaking, young workers bring new energy, new ideas in any workplace. But imagine after working too much hours per day, and every day they become exhausted, stressed, inefficient, and some of them got stroke and heart attack. Imagine that, and you can imagine, and maybe few of them, they even commit suicide. So the basic solution, it can be, for example, imposing a fixed work hours, right? But still, this solution doesn't work in Japan because it's not convenient for Japan economy and ambition of most of Japanese workers. So they want to gain money, they want to achieve their goal in young age. So imagine it's not enough for them. So we proposed to increase multitask ability in a human. So by multitask, what I mean that we can make the best use of time and increase over time and still achieving maximum productivity and improving mental health of our workers. So imagine that, for example, doctors could use a third arm, okay, to bring, for example, some tools, or you can even drink a coffee while you are typing. So you can do many additional things in very short time. So this is the ultimate objective of our research project. So our brain can control not only one or two hands, it can control more than that. I'm talking about the same sensory motor area. However, this idea, it's not new. I mean, 70 people start thinking about this. So the idea of adding extra hands or arms date back to a long time ago, more than 50 years ago, imagine that. And people start thinking about having additional power or additional ability. And in this, for example, talk, I will focus on the multitasking process, which is in our case, the possibility of controlling an additional hand or arm to increase the brain performance and maximize neuroplasticity benefits. So what I mean by neuroplasticity, I mean neuroplasticity. So imagine that you can, when you do like intensive training to controlling the third arm, everything will change in your brain. So moreover, even a simultaneous bilateral movement require a maximum overall activation of muscles contraction, and therefore probably require a firing of maximum number of cortical cells. So even doing like bilateral movement, that's also very, very important. So anyway, many researchers have been trying their best to achieve this goal by controlling some additional hands or fingers using muscles activity or some mechanical aspect. But as I told you in the beginning, like maybe none of them had tried to control these extra devices using brain activity, which is more natural and convenience way for daily life use applications. So that's why we, before controlling this third arm, we need also to check if it's possible to control bilateral movement, to use bilateral movement, to understand the bilateral movement in the brain. So I guess that most of you here now are familiar with motor imagery-based BCI or brain-machine interface. So anyway, sorry, on the slide, there is a brief definition of BMI. You can see it. And in the study we focus is non-invasive. So we would like to use motor control or motor imagery. So perform the movement or just imagine the movement. So we have motor imagery and motor execution. And also we would like to check, I'm not sure if you are familiar that most of study have focused on discriminating unilateral actual or imagined movement, such as, for example, right hand, left hand, or tongue movement or something, but they didn't focus on bilateral movement. So that's why we try to use MEG to understand the bilateral movement. So I think, I guess now everyone of you knows the story behind our research study, which is analyzing and decoding brain activity of bilateral hand movement. And when we understand the bilateral movement very well, we can go to the next step, which is controlling the third arm. So even bilateral movement, if we understand this, we aim to provide a multidimensional control, but using single trial neuromagnetic decoding. So this is also very important. We want something in real time. We don't want like using loop or something or average of many trials. No, we want to use single trial to decode this brain activity. Okay, so let me make it clear that brain activation of bilateral movement still remain unclear. So as you may know, brain activation associated with unilateral movement according to previous studies showing strong contralateral activation and the minimum ipsilateral activation. So imagine if you are moving your left hand, so your right hemispheres will be activated, but also we will see small activation in your left hemisphere. So our hypothesis was that bilateral movement will maybe show bilateral brain activation. Okay, so what we have planning to do is to control a human-like robot and bring someone, put it under MEG, try to understand the bilateral movement, and then control this Geminoid. Okay, this Geminoid was developed by Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro from Japan, from Osaka University. Okay, so here the experimental paradigm, as I said, the first step to develop brain-computer interface is the experimental paradigm. So to achieve our goal, we propose this experimental paradigm. So we asked the participant to perform and also to imagine grasping hand, both bilateral hand movement, and at the same time we were recording his EMG and MEG, because here we didn't use EEG, and we did it for 20 subjects, healthy people, healthy volunteers. Okay, and we asked them, of course, we design some protocol, we give them some instructions. Okay, it's very important, for example, to avoid, especially to avoid visual imagination. So we ask them, for example, to see the instruction, and then we give them 2 seconds, then we ask them to execute the movement, and then we give them 3 seconds for resting. Okay, and we did that mini session, we record mini sessions. Okay, and then after recording this MEG data, we need to do some offline analysis, you know, before going to real-time analysis. So maybe this is for people who would like to use MEG in the future. So of course we combine the MRI with the MEG, the MRI, the structure MRI, with the MEG of 20 subjects. And we have been using a lot of software, for example, MaxFilter to calculate TSSs, and also a free server to calculate the cortical surface from MRI data, and also MATLAB toolbox such as Brainstorm. We use Brainstorm, and also Filter for analyzing the offline analysis. And also we try to get some significant result using this credible open source libraries. And for real-time acquisition of MEG, we use also Filter. So Filter is very good for real time. So we use this toolbox. And maybe this is very simple flow chart. It's very, very important for everyone who would like to do some research using neuromagnetic measurement. Okay. So first of all, we need to do source analysis. So before going to sensor analysis, so we need to do some source analysis. So we need to find which region in the brain is more activated and responsible of moving, for example, or moving or imagining the bilateral hand. Okay, so so that's why we perform the source analysis and sensor analysis. So for that, we have to use to use a source analysis, we need, of course, to mix information from MRI and also from MEG data, okay, from each subject independently. So, of course, there is 6 steps. I will not talk about them all in details to, for example, compute the source and plotting them on the cortex surface, okay? So, if you would like to understand all these details, I will be more than happy in the question, in the end of this presentation, okay? So using, for example, Brainstorm software, we estimate the cortical current density, okay, in 2 scenarios, real and imagined movement for 4 bilateral hand movement. And the brain activation was clear in 2 first classes, but for other classes, it was not clear over subject, okay? So this slide show just the result of maybe subject, I think, number 3. So we have 20 subjects, so this is only 1 subject. Okay, and then we perform group analysis. So after doing, after analyzing the data for each subject, we do group analysis. So this is the result for group analysis. In this slide, The frequency depend spatio-temporal distribution. It is extremely clear. The results are for the right open and left close class. So this is for only one bilateral movement. Okay, so when you close your left hand and you open your right hand. So if you look at this slide, you see that for brain activation, the power increased in the high gamma band, but it was not really always observed by MEG compared with ECOG or ECOG, where high gamma is always increasing or is always clear. So for a sensory modulation, power decrease in the alpha band, and for a motor modulation, power decrease in the beta and also alpha band. And for cognitive and executive modulation, power decrease in low gamma band. Okay, so also this is the result of another class where the right hand is closed and the left hand is open. Okay, so you can notice that we have also bilateral activation in the brain. Okay, this is the result for both hand closed, and this is for both hand open. Okay, so then after doing this sensor analysis, source analysis, we also perform sensor analysis, okay, to understand more what is going on. So in this slide, you can see a typical average waveform of time series and its corresponding time frequency map. So here you can see that we took the information from sensory motor cortex of bilateral hand movement, okay? And what we did, we just calculate wavelet, we use wavelet transform, okay, to check the frequency and during the time and the power, what is going on when someone open or close both hands. Okay, so this is, or perform any bilateral movement. Okay, when I say perform, also imagine. So we have real movement and imagine movement. Okay, and you can see that we observe a clear movement related magnetic field. Okay, I'm talking about MEG signals in the red color. Okay, so and you can also observe also a movement related power decrease in the alpha beta band from 0. I mean, when I say 0 is the movement onset to 0.5, and then the power increase in the beta band. So we call it beta rebound, and clear post-movement beta rebound was observed between 0.5 and 1 second. Okay, and also we have a little bit, we didn't really observe a clear movement related power increase near the high gamma band from 50 to 100 hertz, but this is single trial. Okay, so here we are showing you not the average, so this is just single trial level. That's why maybe it's not that clear, but if you do it, if you do the average for one subject for each class, so it will be much clearer. In addition, for feature extraction, we use sequential feature selection. Okay, this is just to select some subset of features. You can imagine that you have many sensors around sensory motor area, so we would like to know which one of them is more active. That's all. Okay. And then, in addition, the movement-related power increase and decrease in the alpha beta bands were distributed over the sensory motor area in both cerebral hemispheres. Okay, so especially in 136 milliseconds after the presentation of the execution cue. So for all bilateral voluntary movement, okay, and also for motor imagery. Okay, so therefore here we use the spatio-temporal pattern of the low frequency from 8 to 30 hertz of MEG sensor, okay, around the sensory motor cortex. Okay, so we really, after that, we did some statistical analysis, you know, over all subject. We want to see if it's really significant or not, what we really observe for each subject, and we calculate F values and multiple comparison tests for 20 subjects and for each class, for each bilateral movement. And also you can see here that if you observe in single trial, if you observe the time frequency representation you can see that we have clear bilateral activation in all classes, even if you compare the performing the movement or imagining the movement. So in this slide, you can see that the MEG sensors over the sensory motor area of the average time frequency map across subject have a relevant bilateral change in time frequency map. Okay, so for all of them, for all 4 bilateral movements. Okay, and now what we have to do, we have to use this offline analysis. We have to use it in real time analysis. So we have to propose a real time algorithm or flow chart. This one show the offline algorithm. You know, you cannot go directly to the online algorithm. So we try to propose an offline algorithm using a minimum number of sensors, of MEG sensors. We end up with 114 MEG sensors around the sensory motor area to distinguish among 4 classes, 4 bilateral classes. Okay. And we calculate the classification result between 2 classes using SVM at each time point first, and define the most significant time window. This is also very important. And then we fix the time window, use it for this SVM or multi-SVM for this offline classification. And you can see that, of course, after using raw data, we use TSSS, which is Spatio-Temporal signal space separation. This is very important to remove artifacts, and then we use pre-processing. We use here Brainstorm. Okay, so it's very, very powerful software. Okay, you can use it, and then we extract some relevant information. Okay, we use the information from the time frequency. Okay, the power from 0 to 0.5, and then we apply multi-SVM to distinguish between the 4 classes. Here, the result for classification between 2 classes. So it's around, it's approved like 70%, so which is good for performing real time. And between the real movement and the imagined movement, we notice that we have some difference a little bit, but it was not significant. So that's why we try now to control this Geminoid using our algorithm. So imagine that we have an MEG equipment it was in Osaka city, and the Geminoid was in Kobe city, and we try to connect it using TCP/IP, and we send the commands in real time for performing or imagining the bilateral movement, and we try to to receive also the feedback. We use Skype for just as a camera, just to see if we really if the robot performed the movement or not. And we developed this one. You can see it's this real-time decoding algorithm. Of course, we need the time window, sliding time window is very important. And we did it for every 0.2. We record the signal and we check it. Okay, and you can imagine that the most maybe important problem or issue was to find the movement onset. Of course, when you perform the movement onset, it can be measured using EMG, right? The muscles activity. But imagine that when you imagine the movement, you cannot really find the movement onset. So there is another technique to do that. Okay, so here a video I will show you. I hope you can see it. So you can see a human-like robot. It looks like Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro, and we could control it from Osaka. The robot was at Kobe, and we using imagination and performing the bilateral movement, the robot was performing the same movement. You can see the subject or patient was inside the MEG room, and the robot, we got the feedback using the Skype. So you can see, if you look carefully at the robot hand, you will see that the robot is performing the same movement coming from the patient. Okay, so that was in real time. We did it for 4 classes for bilateral hand movement. Okay, and we calculate, of course, the classification accuracy in real time, and we achieve offline decoding accuracy around 70%, and the average online decoding accuracy was around 56 or 60% for contralateral hand movement and for ipsilateral hand movement. And this was published, I think, and also it was in the cover page of IEEE transaction on neuro system and rehabilitation engineering. Okay, but our purpose, as I said, is not only to stay here, not only to control bilateral movement, but also to go for third arm. But before that, we would like also to improve this classification performance. Is there any way to do that? So we think that independent component analysis is a special case of blind source separation, can also help us to improve the classification accuracy. So we try to calculate independent component topography, dipole pattern, and also the independent component activation and power spectral density and time frequency spectrogram. And we observe many dipole patterns distributed around the sensory motor area, which they are probably related to motor-based brain activity. So we don't need muscles activity. We would like to find like motor-based brain activity. And in the meantime, we have been trying to develop a new experiment for controlling the third arm instead of controlling only bilateral hand movement. And here you can see that many researchers have been trying to do that. So we propose a new experimental paradigm. But before that, I can show you that one of our team, Professor Nisho, he could control the third arm, but using EEG. But we do believe that when you use EEG, so this was in ATR laboratory in 2018. So we do believe that there is many muscles artifacts. So that's why we do prefer using MEG first to see if we can do that only using brain activity. Okay, so this is very important. So that's why we propose this experimental paradigm, this new experimental paradigm, where you can see like a virtual environment in front of the subject. So we try to keep his both hands busy, okay, and at the same time there is a virtual hand. We asked him to grasp the bottle and open it, and we record his MEG. And we have been trying to analyze it and try to see what is going on in the sensory motor area when someone tried to control another hand. Okay, so, and I would like also to talk about another project. This one was last year in IEEE SMC, where one of my students participated in the hackathon for controlling a human-like robot. So he could use here P300 to make the robot talk at the same time using many icons. It was in Arabic language. So the student was using P300 speller, was using Unicorn Hybrid Black, and could control this human-like robot. And they won the first prize. So you can see here the P300 speller. So the user could select any letters, and the robot could start talking and start trying to make word or even moving the hand, for example, for saying hello or something. So that also was, they called their project motor mouth brain. it was very, very interesting one. And we are still working on trying to control this kind of a human-like robot in different way, not only using P300 or SSVEP or motor imaging. Okay, so in the end of my presentation, I would like to thank you for listening, and I would like to tell you that the future, to maybe predict the future of BCI, you can just keep watching science fiction movies, and you can see that we have nowadays brain-to-brain control. So we are dreaming maybe to have maybe Internet of Minds or connecting brain to internet. And also we have many topics in the future to address, for example, brain hacking, or maybe mind control, or even like transfer memory or download the new skills in the future. Why not? So we hope maybe one of you here in the audience could do that in the near future. So thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to have your question.
Thank you very much. This was really interesting. And Isha is asking, I would like to ask a question. Do you have any chances to train robots about emotional intelligence?
That's a very, very nice question. To be honest, I already start a project with my student for using neurofeedback and for decoding the emotion. We didn't apply it yet for the robot, and I think it will be very interesting project. Especially we can combine what we got from the EEG, from the BCI, with the facial expression. So you gave me a great idea, but we didn't start it yet.
There's also a much better question. Are there any possible chances for these robots to take control over human population?
To be honest, I do believe that that's why we have been trying to develop a human-like robot or humanoid robots, and I don't think, I think it's a matter of we have ethical approval, and we have the government, and we as researchers, we will of course decide that what we are going to put and what kind of artificial intelligence we are going to put in our robots. So they will be, I think, in the future friendly, they will integrate in our society, they will help us, so you can see them as an additional help. So they will be as an assistance for us. I don't think they will harm us.
It's a funny one. Many people are asking, but there are cyber security normatives from FDA and European Union, and if you're designing medical products, you can just follow the cyber security norms and test very systematically if you're doing everything, and then they are very safe. Actually, medical products are the best controlled product of the world. They are even stricter controlled than aeroplanes. So that's something, because nobody wants to risk that the patient has any problems with a medical device. Nadia is saying, why do we need real-time applications, and what is the benefit compared to offline processing?
So especially when you propose a new experimental paradigm. So if you have a new problem, for example, you want to understand the human behavior or the brain activity during new tasks. So you don't know anything about the brain activation, or you don't have any information. So at this moment, you need offline analysis. You need to record brain activity during very specific experimental paradigm, and then you have to do offline analysis. You have to understand your data. You have to try to find some new relevant information, because you don't know. You don't have like a textbook that said you need this one or this one. You can get, for example, alpha or beta or gamma. No, you don't know this. So that's why we need offline. After understanding or finding some features and decoding, for example, the signals, then we can move to real time. Okay, so for example, if we have classification accuracy, if we are using, let's say, decoding, movement decoding, if we have classification accuracy in offline analysis less than 70%, let's say 50%, or and the chance level, it's for example 50%, so it will be extremely difficult or maybe impossible to go for real time. So that's why offline analysis is extremely important, and then we can move to real time or online analysis.
Diego is asking, did the robot hand send some kind of feedback to the controller?
Sorry, again?
If the robotic hand sends some feedback to the controller?
Unfortunately, we are not using, for example, like tactile, or we are just using visual feedback. We are not using tactile or another kind of feedback. We just try to give the user a feedback, but for the controller, for the robot, of course, if the robot is moving or something, yes, there is information that we collect, and we know that, yes, there is a movement or not. But for the user, no, we didn't add neurofeedback yet.
Okay, so this was really nice, and the questions are getting more and more. It would be nice if you can stay a little bit long and answer them by typing in the answer. And some people are asking how to get in contact with Abdelkader. One very easy chance is during the hackathon, because he's also in the jury and one of the mentors. So in Slack, I'm pretty sure you can directly get in contact, and maybe you can also just post your email. Then people can find you. And Abdelkader, we are having a very difficult exam at the end of the spring school that everybody has to pass to get the certificate. So what would be the question that you would ask our spring school attendees?
So you want a question now?
Yes.
Okay, so I will ask them, why do we need to use a brain-computer interface for controlling humanoid robots? Why do we need to control humanoid robots using brain activity? Why not, for example, using only muscles activity or voice or any other different way?
Okay, this was really nice. Please check also the chat, because they just loved your talk. Great presentation. Pleasure to see you.
Thank you very
and
much.
see you again tomorrow. And we